Good morning, everybody. Can you all hear me? Yes. Okay, great. I want to thank you all for being here today. I'm most appreciative, and thank you to my family for flying in and for David's family for being here as well. I'd like to start by making a couple of little announcements. Lunch is served after the service. Please come downstairs. But I do want to honor and introduce to you, especially to the members of this congregation, one of our grant recipients. First Congregational Church has an endowment, and every year that endowment spills off over $100,000 that we give away in grant money to not-for-profits. And I would like to introduce Manny Mill, Executive Director of Koinonia House, who's one of our grant recipients and is here today to celebrate the life of my husband. Thank you. Thank you, Manny. Thank you. Okay, we're good.
Celebrate morning, the cry of a loon on a lake in the night. Dreams that are born in the dawn's early light. Celebrate morning, celebrate living. The laughter that sings in the heart of a child. Freedom that flies to the call of the wild. Celebrate living. Celebrate living. The stars that appear at the loss of the sun. Whispering winds, we are one, we are one. Celebrate birthday every day. Celebrate birthday every day. Celebrate land and sea, celebrate you and me. Celebrate birthday every day. Celebrate birthday every day. Celebrate birthday every day. Celebrate land and sea, celebrate you and me. Celebrate birthday every day. Every day, every day, every day, every day. Celebrate land and sea, celebrate you and me. Celebrate Earth Day, every day.
Thank you. My opening words for today are from Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. Rachel Carson was a marine biologist who wrote several books during the 1950s and 60s about the natural world. Environmental consciousness was just beginning to take hold in this country, and she became increasingly aware of the damage from the use of pesticides and fertilizers used in the production of food and its devastating effect on the natural world. It took her 4 years to complete Silent Spring, during which time she was battling metastatic breast cancer. The book was completed in 1962, and she died 2 years later at the age of 57. Her book was the catalyst of the modern environmental movement. And at that time, President Kennedy created a committee to look at the impact of DDT, and subsequently it was banned from use. This is a quote from Silent Spring. "Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. There is something infinitely healing in the repeated refrains of nature, the assurance that dawn comes after night and spring after winter. In nature, nothing exists alone." We celebrate today the life of my husband, David Segel. David's life was one of constant movement between all of his passions, especially those connected to the earth and the creation of a sustainable world. David was born in Schenectady, New York in 1932 and attended Union College in Schenectady and graduated in 1954 with a degree in political science and went on to NYU to become a lawyer, working for 17 years in the New York University health system. He relocated to Chicago in the 1970s, where he took a position as in-house counsel for Michael Reese Hospital on Chicago's South Side, and later as in-house counsel for Catholic Consortium. His work, what he did for a living, was instrumental in seeing the connection between health and the environment. David and I met in 1980, where we both worked for the Illinois Hospital Association and were married in 1983. And we lived in Elmhurst for 17 years. During that time, we became involved with Unity Temple in Oak Park, a Frank Lloyd Wright Unitarian Universalist congregation. And if any of you have ever been in this building, its connection to the natural world can be easily seen. The congregation at this time was overwhelmed by the expense of the maintenance and restoration of the building, and I was on the church council, and David was on the restoration board, and together we convinced the congregation to grant a historic preservation easement on the inside of the building. At that time, it wasn't easy to attach architecture to the natural world. But Frank Lloyd Wright somehow saw this through the design of his building, which he called organic. And during this time, we began to get involved in environmental and social justice issues through the church, and then later through various other organizations, which had a long history of social activism. Through his involvement in the church, David became a part of a movement to lobby on behalf of environmental issues. Back to creating this trust, it was the trust that we created for the inside of that building was the very first one done in the United States. And as a result of that, we traveled with the National Trust for Historic Preservation to other congregations throughout the country to convince and encourage them to do that. And the purpose of creating an internal an easement is to raise money for the building and to preserve the building so that it doesn't get changed in its original form. Now, here's a David story. I have lots of little David stories for you, but this one, during the 1970s in Illinois, a garbage crisis arose. Where to put all the garbage created by human beings? In 1988, Illinois legislature passed a law called the Retail Rate Law, which encouraged developers to build waste-to-energy plants by providing them with tax incentives. And where do you suppose these incinerators were going? Well, they were going on the south side of Chicago, the southeast side of Chicago, in the poorest neighborhoods, inhabited mostly by people of color who did not have the political clout to stop them. The exposure from these plants would have exceeded health benchmark standards. So out of that movement came a grassroots organization through Unity Temple, and David was a part of it. It was called WASTE, W-A-S-T-E. of which David was a strong voice. Waste consisted of many local organizations who band together to repeal the law, and that happened. After many battles with cities, many battles with the state, it was repealed in 1994, and waste continues to operate to this day. David had a lot of interests, and his main interest was in music. He absolutely loved all kinds of music, especially music written before 1975. But in looking at all of the music that he had accumulated over the past 40 years, the one artist stood out for me and that he talked about a lot and that we got more involved with when there were concerts around his music. And that was Paul Robeson. He became interested in the life of Paul Robeson. Was an American bass baritone concert artist, a stage and film actor, an athlete, and an activist who became famous for both his cultural accomplishments and for his political stances. His father was a runaway slave, and his mother was a Quaker. He was college educated at Rutgers University and twice named All-American in football. He received his LLB from Columbia University. His political activities began in London with unemployed workers and supporting of the Republican cause during the Spanish Civil War and his involvement on Council on African Affairs. His social activism caused him to lose his passport to prevent his travel to speak about social issues. He recorded over 276 songs during his lifetime, including spirituals, classical music, folk songs, political songs, and poetry. He used his music to share the cultures of other countries and to benefit the labor and social movements of the time. We're going to play a song from one of the songs that he's well known for, and most of you have heard it before. It was a song that was recorded for a musical called Showboat, and Showboat originated in 1927, but he recorded this song in the 1930s when Showboat was made into a musical. It contrasts the struggle and hardships of African American life with the flow of a massive river.
Colored folks work on the Mississippi. Colored folks work while the white folks play. Pulling those boats from the dawn till sunset. Getting no rest till the judgment day. Don't look up and don't look down. Don't ask make the white boss frown. Bend your knees and bow your head and pull that rope until you're dead. Let me go away from the Mississippi. Let me go away from the white man boss. Show me that stream called the River Jordan. That's the old stream that I long to cross. Old Man River, that old man River, he don't say nothing, but must know something. He just keeps rolling, he keeps on rolling along. He don't plant taters, he and strain, body all aching and racked with pain. Tote that barge, lift that bale, little drunk and your land in jail. I get weary and sick of trying. I'm tired of living and scared of dying. An old man river, it just keeps rolling on.
Thank you, Jim. We moved to Elgin in the year 2000, where David became active in an organization called Faith in Place. Faith in Place is a community of people of diverse faith all around the Chicago area, primarily in primarily poor neighborhoods, but people of Christian, Jewish, Muslim, everybody belongs to this group, and what they do is they care for one another and our shared land. Each congregation creates a green team and is trained and coached to create lasting changes in their particular environment where they're living, especially for those who are impacted by environmental injustice, and believe that the environmental movement must be rooted in justice. Programs there include advocacy, energy, climate change, youth, food, land use, and water. He also became involved with the Illinois Environmental Council, a consortium and a state local legislator. He was a board member for 20 years on the IEC. And what IEC does is it advances public policies that create healthy environments across the state for the protection of land, air, water, wildlife, and human health. He was awarded an Environmental Leadership Award by IEC in 2016. Now, David jumped into living in Elgin with both feet. He became quickly involved in the community's green initiatives, involving himself in the annual Green Expo, for which he was recognized in 2013. His main activity at that time was serving on the Elgin Sustainability Commission, which he did from its inception from 2013 to 2018, and received a certificate of appreciation from the city. He also received an Elgin Image Award nomination in 2018 as recognition for his significant contributions to the city. In 2016, a proclamation from the Office of the Mayor was given by the city for his contribution in the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Board from 2002 to 2005, and was a member of the Green Building Technology and Energy Efficiency Work Group, whose recommendations were incorporated into Elgin's Sustainability Action Plan. He served on the Downtown Neighborhood Association Committee from 2001 to 2019. He was a member of the Elgin Climate Change Organization Board, the Elgin Hispanic Network, as well as a community organizer for the U.S. Census. He also served on Kane County's Home Commission for several years before he became unable to participate in their work. And in his spare time, David was an avid runner. He participated in 5K, 10K, and half marathon runs for so many years, I really can't even count them. He rarely won first place until he hit his 70s. And then he started getting awards. And what were the awards for? Being the oldest runner. It's easy to let the memory of his dementia color his accomplishments, because it lasted for 10 years, of which the last 2 years were spent in long-term care. It is important to remember what his life achieved before that and the person who truly loved this planet and wanted to make a difference. So, all of you sitting out there and all of you watching, let this be a challenge to you all. Find your passion, whatever it is, and run with it as far as you can. And his memory will run with you all. Now, I was thinking about his music again because he had a collection of CDs that took me probably 2 or 3 carloads to donate when he passed. And I looked at his collection and I said, you know what? He really loved jazz. He loved jazz. He loved jazz, all kinds of jazz, and he dragged me to more jazz concerts than I care to remember because I never understood the improvisational part of jazz, and so it just didn't click for me, but he loved it. Now, jazz originated in New Orleans in the late 19th century, early 20th century. And it originated with the African-American community there who were freed slaves because New Orleans allowed African-Americans to own musical instruments. And so they gathered in New Orleans. And, if you listen to jazz, it's our truly most American music. There's no music like it anywhere else in the world. And it has an interpretation of American and European and classical, and it's entwined with African and slave folk songs. So we're going to close today with a little Thelonious Monk, which he also loved, called Blue Monk, played by our own Pastor Jesse. And please join us afterwards downstairs for lunch. Thank you all for being here. Before we leave, I would like to just a personal minute. As you all know, David spent the last 2 years of his life in long-term care during the COVID pandemic. During the COVID pandemic, over 150,000 seniors died due to COVID-19. And as a proportion of the million people who passed on, that's a very large proportion. One of the things that I became aware of is the need for nursing home care reform. I can't tell you what the experience was like without getting too emotional. But the more time I spent within the nursing home, the more I realized that there was systemic issues that needed to change for the future of people who are going to end up in long-term care. And to that end, I would like to recognize Anna Moeller. Anna Moeller is our local state representative and was instrumental with her long-term care group in passing legislation several weeks ago to make permanent long-term care reform happen. Please stand up, Anna, and be recognized. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now go on downstairs and have lunch.